Welcome to Comics Bazaar, the channel of comics commentary and arcana. This video features Factor X #1, cover dated March 1995. And this is, of course, the Age of Apocalypse version of X Factor, and it does feature a couple of the original members of the X-Men and thus of the very first iteration of X Factor, and that is Beast and Cyclops. And we also have here on the cover Alex Summers' Havok, and surprisingly from Alpha Flight we have Northstar and Aurora, his twin sister. A really excellent cover here by Steve Epting, inking himself as well. Always prefer when an artist inks their own work. And let's open this one up to the first page and see how this particular issue begins. So we have a running first-person narration by, as it will turn out, Mr. Sinister throughout this issue. And he opens by saying, "Following the battles of Ascendancy in which my Lord Apocalypse conquered the continental United States, he transformed the island of Manhattan into his fortress stronghold, a new city as dangerously magnificent as the dark soul of En Sabah Nur himself. In this age of apocalypse, only the strong survive, while the rest pray for deliverance or run for their lives." And then we start with a little episode, an action episode of these prisoners escaping from Mr. Sinister's pens in Manhattan, and they're caught. And who are they caught by? They're caught by Apocalypse's elite mutants, and that turns out to be, well, Cyclops and Havok and Northstar and Aurora here as well. So pretty excellent image here by Steve Epting, because this is our creative team. John Francis Moore on script duties, coming over from X-Men 2099. Steve Epting penciler, Al Milgrom inker, Richard Starkings and Comic Craft lettering, and Glynis Oliver is the colorist. So really great work throughout this by Steve Epting and Glynis Oliver, complementing each other in terms of the grimy art style and the grimy color palette that Oliver uses in this particular issue. So Cyclops and Havok here aboard their motorcycles have caught these escapees, and so we get a little action sequence. And here we have Cyclops, who has been mutilated by Weapon X. Wolverine has only got one eye working, and he uses that to blast some of these escapees here. And we discovered that they are versions, some of them, of Magneto's original Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. So we've got Pyro here. It's a blend of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants and Freedom Force. So we've got Pyro here. And in this version of the character, when he uses his power, he actually ends up burnt himself. So we see the mutilation of his body from his use of his control, his control over fire. So he blasts Havok off his motorcycle, but Havok just lets rip with his plasma blast back at Pyro. "Now you've got me mad, Ozzy," he says. It's a really great anchor image there. Really kinetic and dynamic art by Steve Epting throughout this issue. You can see it here on these two pages as well. And here we've got, it seems like a version of Toad, so one of the original members of Magneto's Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. And in this reality, he's known as Newt. And Jean-Paul Beaubier, Northstar, says to him, "Newt, you're a sorry excuse for a mutant," and just punches him out. "I do not need to waste my energy on the likes of you." This other character, Fantasia, is beaten by Aurora, and she begs for mercy to be killed now and not sent back to the pens. And in those pens are held mutants that Mr. Sinister and Dark Beast experiment on in order to create the next generation of genetically engineered and enhanced Homo superior. But one of the escapees gets the better of Cyclops, and that is this character here, whose name is Artemis, but she recalls in some regards Callisto of the Morlocks. But Callisto shows up in Excalibur, the Age of Apocalypse version of that title later on. So it is a new character, and she's got chameleon-like powers, which enabled her to blend into the ruins here of. It looks like what's that? That arch near Central Park in Manhattan. Cyclops here says he doesn't want to hurt her. He just wants to take her back to the pens. And she says in response, "Your concern touches me, Summers, but you should know better. There's no place for compassion in post-apocalypse America." And she's ultimately blasted by Havok. So much for the Morlock, he says. And Cyclops says, "You didn't have to kill her, Alex. I had things under control." And Havok says, "Dead or alive, what do you care? She was a rabbit. Besides, McCoy can still take tissue samples from the body." So we have this very interesting nature versus nurture thematic in relation to Cyclops and Havok in this Age of Apocalypse reality. They've been brought up by Mr. Sinister rather than Professor X finding Cyclops in the Nebraska orphanage. It would appear that it was Sinister who found him and acted as his parent, father, mentor, but Havok as well. And the two are very different in character in this Age of Apocalypse version. Havok is very much a ambitious, remorseless character, whereas Cyclops retains some vestiges of compassion and is much less extreme and radical character than his younger brother Havok. Love this image here by Epting, where Havok throws away the blade that Artemis was going to stab Cyclops with, and he says to him, "And you're getting soft, my brother. Maybe I should have let her put this through your ribs. First law of apocalypse, survival of the fittest. I'm sure you remember." And we're going to see that Havok has, as I said, ambitions in this reality that involve perhaps ultimately maybe fratricide, taking out his own brother. Now turn the page and we've got this excellent image here. Great combination of the art and the color here. These really grimy magentas and blues here on the page for what has replaced the Statue of Liberty. And it is a massive version of Apocalypse himself. And we go back to Sinister's narration, where he says, "For over a century on this island, Lady Liberty welcomed the wretched refuse of the world, lighting the promise of a new world, but no longer. Now Liberty's generous countenance has been replaced by the stern and fearsome visage of Apocalypse, a warning to the world that as America offers no succor to the homeless and tempest-tossed." So that's excellent. And I love these floating ships in the sky as well. Really nice work on the page. And then we zoom in. Epting's storytelling is excellent here in these three panels. We zoom in on these lighted eyes of Apocalypse, and it turns out who's standing in one of the eyes except for Mr. Sinister himself. And he says here, "I stand in the representation of the self-same watchful eye of Apocalypse." But he thinks to himself, and I like the fact that John Francis Moore here has Sinister not soliloquizing out loud, but actually thinking. He is a thinker in this reality, and has plots and schemes that Sinister isn't, or that Apocalypse isn't aware of. So he thinks to himself here, of course, as Sinister, fourth prefect of Apocalypse, I have long stood in the heart of the beast. After years of manipulating the development of a handful of mutants in secret, I finally have the resources to engineer the evolution of mutant kind to my design. And Apocalypse threatens to destroy all my work by goading the human government to the brink of world war. He has forced my hand sooner than expected. Therefore, I must abandon my elite mutant force. And we see them pictured here on screen. We're going to learn more about who they are exactly in the course of the issue. Dark Beast we've already encountered in X-Men Alpha. These twins here, as they'll turn out, and these siblings here are, well, these are new characters and these are familiar ones. You probably might even guess from the sticky out ears and the kind of lean visage of this character that it is Sam Guthrie, Cannonball, and indeed that will turn out to be the case, and that is his older sister, who in this reality has mutant powers and abilities. So Sinister continues with his thoughts here about his sons, quote unquote, and in particular his concern for Cyclops, where he thinks here, and though you will hate me for deserting you like your biological father, know this, Scott Summers, without you, what I'm about to attempt would never have been possible. And what that is, of course, will be revealed in further issues of this title and other titles of the series, The Age of Apocalypse. I really love this concluding image here. And again, that combination, that perfect combination of Epting's pencils, Milgrom is doing well on the inking, and Glynis Oliver's colours. Love the use of magenta there at the edge of this image. Really, really great work on these pages. And something else I want to say on the subject of Epting's art is it was this series, Factor X, and then his continuing work on X Factor when it reverted to the original title after The Age of Apocalypse, that really made me appreciate Steve Epting's art. And looking at it again, like from the vantage point of almost 30 years later, it just looks excellent. It's really great work from him. One of the strongest art jobs on the series of Age of Apocalypse titles. And then we switch to the scene to the pens themselves. And we've got another escape attempt going on, which is put down by the characters we saw on Sinister's screens. So we've got the Guthrie siblings here. And then we have the arrival of two other siblings, the brothers Summers, Havok and Cyclops. And Cyclops takes immediate charge, saying, "At ease, Guthrie, no need to be cruel. We're negotiating with the Human Council after all." But Cannonball in this alternative reality is a harder, darker, grimmer figure altogether than the one that we know from the ordinary, regular reality. He says, "I don't give a rat's behind about the Human Council," but Scott basically asserts his authority here and says, "You're in no position to give me attitude, Rook. The runners we spiked tonight escaped on your watch, and I'd better things to do than clean up after wet-nosed punks. Understand?" So Cannonball backs down and says, "Yes, sir." Also, and he says to Alex, "Keep your droogs in line. I've got to check in with Sinister." So here we have some insubordination in the ranks here from Cannonball. Prelate, he asks Havok, "Do I have to take that from him?" And Havok responds, "Sinister made my brother head of the EMF. He outranks us all for now." So there's plots and schemes going on. And then we switch to the Dark Beast's lab. And again, we have Sinister's first-person narration here, giving some background on Henry McCoy, a brilliant geneticist whose unorthodox experimentation radicalized his own mutation. And so he has this different, more monstrous form in Age of Apocalypse. And he's got a lupine companion, and the implication is, I think, that this is supposed to be Rain in this issue, but that's not made explicit. And then we have Havok's arrival, and he says here to Dark Beast, "You should keep the kennel gate closed, McCoy. You're letting out strays." So, you know, it's interesting to think about Cyclops berating Cannonball for letting prisoners out. That ultimately being, seemingly Havok's responsibility, but then he basically puts the blame on Beast. And so Beast here says, "Alex Summers, what brings my most recent and high-ranking patient to these quarters? Are you experiencing separation pangs following your unfortunate transporter mishap?" And there's a reference to Weapon X there, and I've got a video about that where in the transportation back to Manhattan, which was brought about by a Sentinel. The Sentinel's hand bonded with Havok, and Dark Beast had to separate them, and the process was incredibly painful. And notice here in the art in the background, we've got these prisoners strung up, bound with these chains, and they're strung up over this bubbling vat of what is it. Well, Dark Beast presses a button, click, and continues his conversation with Havok, and we get an explanation of what goes on in these vats. And it's how Dark Beast creates the infinites that are the kind of foot soldiers of Apocalypse's army that maintains control over North America. So the prisoners there are horrifically lowered into this bubbling vat, and Dark Beast explains that the prisoners are broken down into a basic protoplasmic soup. He says, from this genetic gumbo, I can manipulate nucleotide sequences as I please, creating a patchwork protein of mutant DNA that becomes the organic foundation of my infinites. But Havok makes the point that the hybrids can't survive more than a year, the perils of accelerated tissue growth. So that's what's going on with those foot soldiers. And really it kind of points the degree to which a beast without any ethics or morality could turn into this mad and bad scientist in the Age of Apocalypse reality. So Havok here is feeling out Dark Beast in terms of whether he would support him, Havok, were he to make a move against his brother. He says, as a scientist, you know that change is inevitable, and he says his brother seems preoccupied lately. His reflexes are dulled, his judgment impaired. So Dark Beast twigs to what Havok is suggesting. Hypothetically, he says, I love that, I will support whoever allows me to continue my work here. And you should remember that Sinister holds your brother in high regard. He'll not lightly overlook a fratricide. So, interesting plotting going on there. And then we switch focus to Cyclops, and then we have these two brothers here, the Bedlam brothers, and Terrence and Jesse Aronson. So they're unique and created, bespoke for the Age of Apocalypse reality. They're new characters, and we'll discover as the story proceeds exactly what their mutant powers are. But they have a like the image here of them fighting against each other belies their actual sanguine brotherly relationship. So they're actually interesting characters because they bring a little bit of lightness to the grimness of Sinister's pens and these alternative versions of Cyclops and Havok. And Cyclops has, well, they're heading off to Heaven nightclub, which is run by Age of Apocalypse version of Warren Worthington, that's Archangel. And it is this club where humans and mutants can mix together, and it's kind of like there is a truce between them within the nightclub, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a couple of pages' time. So this is really cool as well, where Sinister has posted these disembodied telepaths bred to be gatekeepers outside his laboratory. And Sinister here in his narration explains, I've conditioned their psionically sensitized brains to recognize and respond only to specific thought patterns. So one of those would be Cyclops. And I love the image here that Epting has come up with, the brain, and then just this one single eye that peeks out of the top of the brain. And of course, it's interesting to consider Cyclops with his one eye interacting with this disembodied brain and one eye as well. And Sinister here is monitoring things from the head of Apocalypse out like in that massive statue, and he's talking here to Cyclops as he sees him on screen. I told you once, my grim son, that we are looking at the end of the world. I don't think you realized then I was telling you goodbye. I don't think you realized I've set you free. And that is reference to episode in X-Men Alpha #1. Now here we are in Angel's nightclub, Heaven, and Havok has gone along. And what's cool here in the snatches of dialogue that we hear from the guests at the nightclub, or the patrons of the nightclub, is this one here. Worthington can get you letters of transit, Laszlo, if you've got, the money or whatever to pay for it. And that's a reference to John Huston's Casablanca, the film, and Rick's gin bar in that film noir, where it precisely was this truce place where refugees from occupied France and Nazis themselves mixed. So yeah, it's pretty cool to have that kind of illusion here in respect of Warren's nightclub heaven. So we see the Aronson brothers here relaxing on their date, and they invite Havok over, but he says later, perhaps I have other things to attend to. And so he has a chat with Warren here, and Warren greets him not that he's hopefully not on official business. Not this time, Worthington, says Havok. Although I'm told the Cajun Trader was here recently, and that's an episode that was covered in X-Men Alpha #1. And Warren makes the point, anyone who can pay is welcome here, Alex. You know that. I'd hate to have to shut you down. This is the last decent place in the city to get a drink, even as Warren hands him a drink there. I like that little character bit. So even though Havok in this reality is a proper psychopath, he has a little bit of a human side, and we're going to see another aspect of that too, because here we have Heaven's cabaret singer, star cabaret singer, Scarlett Mackenzie. So she's going to launch into a Cole Porter tune, Let's Do It, Let's Fall in Love. But we have the arrival of, and this was a surprise, Henry Peter Gyrick, the Age of Apocalypse version of him. And here in this reality, he is a, where's the word over here? He is a, let's see. There is a nice phrase here for him. Oh, I'll forget it for the moment. But anyway, he's there to take out Homo Superior. He calls them freaks and says, in the end, the righteous will dance on the grave of Homo Superior. So the Aronson twins go into action to take on Gyrick. And we now get an explanation of their powers. So this is really cool here in the dialogue. If you don't believe me, he says, the explosive wired to my body will destroy. And then trout, choke, dresser, hole, trace blue, doorknob as his weapon explodes. So the twins ask Scarlett, is she okay? We acted as quickly as we could, they say. Thanks for the assist, she says. And she says, ladies and gentlemen, let's give a big round of applause for my heroes, the Bedlam brothers. So they get the applause there. And then we have Sinister's first-person narration that explains things. Consider the mutant abilities of the Aronsons as zeitgeist, a sign of these chaotic times. One instills mental confusion while the other psionically monkey wrenches machinery. So that's what we saw there. One mentally confusing Gyrick, and the other monkey wrenching the machinery, the gun blowing up. And that's pretty cool. And so Scarlett says, now since I'd be a fool to try and follow that act, I'll simply say goodnight. On stage, the singer appears open and intimate with her adoring audience. Off stage, she keeps the truth of her life guarded in secrecy. Secrets can be seductive. They can also prove deadly. And here we go. There is an illicit affair going on between Scarlett and Havok. And then we switch back to the pens, and Cyclops is up wondering where the others have been. They've been out too late. And yeah, they refer here to Gyrick's attack on the club as a terrorist attack. And yeah, and here one of the Aronson brothers makes a joke regarding Havok. Alex got lost backstage, he says. Can't say that I blame him. She's extremely attractive for it. And he's about to say human, and Havok interrupts immediately and says, watch your mouth, Aronson. If you're implying I'm involved with a flat scan, you better be prepared to defend yourselves. But the other brother intervenes and says, calm down, Alex. Jesse was only kidding. We all know the penalties for miscegenation. So in this reality, there's to be no mixing of humans and mutants from Apocalypse's point of view. And Havok is breaking that law, and that's interesting. Again, it gives more rounding to his character. So Cyclops says they've got a real problem, which is he can't get into Sinister's lab, and Sinister's been missing for days. Havok makes the point, Sinister's a horseman. He comes and goes as he pleases, and that's interesting. Sinister refers to himself as a prefect of Apocalypse's, but everyone else refers to him as a horseman, along with the likes of Holocaust, for example. So Cyclops turns to Terry Aronson to use his power and disrupt the telepath guarding the entrance to Sinister's lab. And again, I like this dog sweat wandering feeble. So now the doors open and in they go to Sinister's private chambers. And they're destroyed. They're wrecked. So this has taken them by surprise. Havok thinks it could have been one of Magneto's crew. But we get from the first-person exposition that it's Sinister. I had no choice but to slag the equipment that held decades of research data. I can't afford to leave any clue to my desperate design. So here we have Cyclops concluding that Sinister's abandoned them, and one of the Aronson brothers here makes the point: Scott's being Sinister's right hand. Nobody knows the pens better than him. So they're thinking about who's in charge now that Sinister's gone. So Cyclops, after a pause, confirms, right, I'm in charge. Interesting that. It's not a position he especially wants, but he takes it over out of a sense of duty. But here's his brother scheming wickedly. Not if I have anything to do about it, brother. The fuse is lit, says Sinister. Last page. An apocalypse awaits the explosion. Humanity and mutant kind have so little time left to them, and time is more of the essence than ever. So this secret base in the statue of Apocalypse is rigged to auto-destruct and blows Apocalypse's head off. Really, really cool ending to this issue. So Sinister concludes in his first-person narration, "My children, I can shepherd you no longer. You're on your own." Next, a desperate fight for survival ensues for the prisoners of the breeding pens as brother turns against brother in a world gone mad. This is really an excellent issue of the Age of Apocalypse crossover series, event series. Great art, great colouring. John Francis Moore does an excellent job on the story itself, but also the dialogue and the kind of the characterization of Havok and Cyclops and their sibling rivalry, ratcheted up to a point of perhaps murderous conclusion in regards to the plot that Havok is hatching against his older brother. Excellent, excellent issue. Do let me know what you make of it in the comments to the video. And if you enjoyed this review and commentary, please like the video on YouTube. And if you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for more content like this.